You want to know why I have a bug up my ass about the left more than I used to? It's like this. There's an ugliness they never used to have. The liberals I grew up respecting, none of them are like this. Democrats have become like a royal family that, because of so much incest, has unfortunately had children who are... I watched the evolution of both these guys. This didn't happen overnight. In 2022, before he owned Twitter, Elon tweeted this chart depicting how he felt about the liberal side having shifted so much that it left a basically liberal centrist like him now labeled a conservative. I related. I related to the kind of mean girl you get from the cool kids in Wokeville when you're perceived that way. They tried real hard to cancel Rogan a few years ago. And when Elon hosted Saturday Night Live in 2021, well before he was a Trumper, some of the cast members gave him the cold shoulder for the sin of being rich.
There comes a point when even someone who spent years defending liberalism stops and thinks, what on earth happened here? That's exactly where Bill Maher is right now. Not just mildly annoyed or rolling his eyes, this is full-on frustration, like he's finally hit his limit. Enough is enough. And honestly, whether you agree with him or not, you can understand why this moment is hitting so hard. Before we dive into it, make sure to like, subscribe, and drop a comment, because this conversation reveals a lot more about the
Supreme Court and left us completely unprotected and ready to be violated.
What makes Maher interesting is that he's not some lifelong conservative who suddenly picked up a new hobby attacking Democrats. That's what makes this different. He's coming from inside the house. He's not saying, I hate liberal values. He's saying, I barely recognize the people claiming to represent them anymore. That's a huge distinction, because when someone who has spent decades identifying with the left starts saying the party has become smug, hostile, and addicted to bad ideas, it should raise some serious questions. Not because he's always right, but because he's saying out loud what a lot of people have been thinking quietly for years. And let's be honest, that quiet part is over. The biggest problem for Democrats isn't just that voters disagree with them on certain issues. It's that more and more people feel like they can't even speak honestly around them anymore. That's the point Maher keeps coming back to. It's not just about ideology, it's about attitude. It's the sneer, the sense of moral superiority, that aggressive hyper-online energy that turns every disagreement into a purity test and every question into a problem. People can handle policy disagreements. What they can't stand is being treated like they're stupid or evil just because they don't know the latest approved vocabulary that showed up on social.
Seth Moulton said, I have 2 little girls. I don't want them getting run over on a playing field by a formerly male athlete. But as a Democrat, I'm supposed to be afraid to say that. Yes, there's the problem in a nutshell. Because Congressman Moulton sounds reasonable to me, but his campaign manager immediately resigned in protest. Let me make this as plain as I can to the smart people. The campaign manager who resigned, yeah.
Massachusetts Congressman Seth Moulton said, I have 2 little girls. I don't want them getting run over on a playing field by a formerly male athlete. But as a Democrat, I'm supposed to be afraid to say that, and there it is, the problem in a nutshell. To many people, that sounds like a reasonable concern. But his campaign manager immediately resigned in protest. Let me put it plainly, if someone reacts like that, maybe they're the one who should go. That's where the real issue comes into focus, because this isn't just about the left becoming more progressive. It's about it becoming meaner, colder, more punitive, less interested in persuasion and more focused on public shaming. NCE that becomes the culture, everything starts to fall apart from the inside. Debate disappears. Curiosity fades. Humor vanishes. Even basic human grace starts to slip away. Suddenly, it's not enough to disagree with someone, you have to exile them, shame them, and try to destroy them, and if that's not enough, it spreads further, to their spouse, their friend.
It's important for America to have a center-left party, and for that party to be competitive. And a good first step toward that goal would be to make the voters not want to punch you in the face. I will conclude by saying the reason I'm so mad at the Democrats is because as a voter, the issues that were important to me were democracy and the environment. And now There's no one to champion or defend either of them because you, with your aggressively anti-common sense agenda and exclusionary attitude, blew it.
That's a huge.
Rogan and Elon Musk have become such big symbols in this conversation. Not because they're identical, and not because they're beyond criticism, but because both have come to represent what happens when someone refuses to fall in line with online consensus. The point is, neither of them started out as some cartoon villain to the left. They were pushed into that role, or at the very least, pushed into opposition, by a culture that treats any deviation like betrayal, and that's the part many activists still don't seem to understand. People remember how you treat them. They remember being dismissed. They remember being talked down to.
It didn't happen overnight. In 2022, before he owned Twitter, Elon tweeted this chart depicting how he felt about the liberal side having shifted so much that it left a basically liberal centrist like him now labeled a conservative. I related to the kind of mean girl you get from the cool kids in Wokeville when you're perceived that way. They tried real hard to cancel Rogan a few years ago. And when Elon hosted Saturday Night Live in 2021, well before he was a Trumper, some of the cast members gave him the cold shoulder for the sin of being rich. You think people don't remember when you do this to them? That it's not going to have blowback?
And politics, by the way, is full of pendulum swings. It always has been. One side goes too far, starts acting like it has a permanent moral mandate, begins reshaping the culture in its own image, and eventually, people get exhausted and swing the other way. That's not some groundbreaking insight.
Works these days. One side gets elected precisely because the other side was just in power and pushed their agenda way too far and drove people in the opposite direction. The pendulum swings back and forth with people not voting for anything, but just to get rid of the latest extremists who tried to remake America in their image instead of just governing.
That's just how people work. Most voters aren't sitting at home asking to be culturally re-educated by a think piece or a hashtag. They want competence, stability, lower costs, safe neighborhoods, and functional schools. They want leaders who can solve real problems without sounding like they learned human interaction from a hyper-online group chat. That's why
Last week, Massachusetts Congressman Seth Moulton said, "I have 2 little girls. I don't want them getting run over on a playing field by a formerly male athlete. But as a Democrat, I'm supposed to be afraid to say that." Yes, there's the problem in a nutshell. Because Congressman Moulton sounds reasonable to me, but his campaign manager immediately resigned in protest. Let me make this as plain as I can to the smart people. The campaign manager... You know what the ick is, right? It's a term mostly used in the dating world to describe that moment when one of the people, usually the man, does something so icky that the woman cannot forgive it or forget it. Like sending a pic or being mean to the waitress, paying for dinner.
Maher's frustration with the Democratic Party hits harder than a typical partisan rant. He's not saying liberalism failed because caring about the environment or democracy is wrong. He's saying those issues got buried under a pile of noise. That's the real tragedy.
Ideathons, where they try to figure out why they keep losing elections. You know, apart from using words like ideathon. And now one idea that's getting a lot of attention is the Dems need to find their Joe Rogan, a liberal Joe Rogan, because that's why Kamala lost. Republicans have a podcast. Okay, maybe. Or you could consider this. Instead of conjuring up a new Joe Rogan, ask yourself why you lost the old one. Because he used to be on your side. He smokes pot on the... Who Larry David was quoted as describing as the best person I've ever met, the one person in Hollywood who doesn't have a single enemy. Well, now she does. Because she didn't throw her husband under the bus when her husband made a decision about something which she's made plain she disagrees with, but that didn't satisfy the obnoxious posers on the aforementioned far left. Thousands tweet screamed at Cheryl things like, "How do you live with yourself? Do better. I can't even enjoy the episodes of Curb Your Enthusiasm with you in them anymore." It's no wonder Larry divorced you.
Tragedy. The party had serious issues to run on, real concerns people genuinely care about. But instead of staying focused and disciplined, it let itself get pulled into fringe debates and